The Cooper family had just moved into their new home in Texas. It was the 1950s, a time of optimism and new beginnings. To celebrate, they gathered around the dining table for a family portrait. The father, Mr. Cooper, raised the camera and snapped a picture of his wife, his mother, and his two young children, all smiling, excited for their new life. They sent the film to be developed. Weeks later, they got the prints back. And what they saw was impossible. There, hanging upside down from the ceiling, was the dark, silhouetted, decaying body of a man. He wasn't there when the photo was taken. The room was empty except for them. Yet, there he was, captured in that single, horrifying frame. The Cooper family photo remains one of the most chilling, unexplained pictures in history, a terrifying glimpse of something that shared their new home. A photograph captures a single moment in time, but what if it also captures something that doesn't belong? Something from beyond the veil, something that was never meant to be seen. Today, we aren't just looking at blurry images you've seen before. We are diving deep into the full, dark, and often tragic stories behind 5 of the most famous photographs that seem to have captured the impossible. These are the unseen stories that defied all explanation. Welcome. In our world, seeing is believing. We trust our eyes, and more than that, we trust the camera. The camera, we are told, does not lie. It is an impartial witness, freezing reality in silver and light. But what if it does lie? Or worse, what if it tells a truth so profound, so unsettling, that our minds refuse to accept it? The 5 stories you are about to hear are more than just ghost pictures. They are historical records of tragedy, grief, and terror. They are moments when the barrier between our world and another seemed to grow thin. These images have been scrutinized by scientists, analyzed by photographic experts, and debated by skeptics for decades. And while some have been dismissed, others remain stubbornly, terrifyingly unexplained. Our first story takes us to an old English manor and a staircase where a tragedy from 200 years prior was about to make itself known. Raynham Hall in Norfolk, England, is a house of history and secrets. Built in the 17th century, it is the ancestral home of the Townshend family, and like many grand old houses, it has a ghost. But this isn't just any ghost. This is perhaps the most famous ghost ever photographed. Her story begins, as they so often do, with a tragic marriage. In 1713, Dorothy Walpole, a beautiful and vibrant young woman, was married to Charles Townshend. Townshend was a man of politics, known for his violent, unpredictable temper. The legend states that Dorothy, trapped in a loveless marriage, had an affair with a man named Lord Worthon. When Townshend discovered the infidelity, his rage was absolute. He didn't just divorce her. He didn't just cast her out. He imprisoned her. Dorothy Walpole was locked away in a remote room of Raynham Hall. She was forbidden from seeing her friends, her family, even her own children. She lived as a prisoner in her own home until her death in 1726. The official cause was smallpox, but whispers in the halls claimed it was a broken heart, or perhaps something more violent. For another century, the house was quiet. Then the sightings began. In 1835, during a Christmas gathering, a guest named Colonel Loftus and a man named Hawkins were walking to their rooms late one night. As they approached the main staircase, they both saw her. A woman, dressed in a heavy brown brocade dress. Her face was pale, luminous, but where her eyes should have been, there were only dark, hollow sockets. They watched, frozen, as she glided down the stairs, pausing to look directly at them before vanishing. The next night, Loftus saw her again. This time, he was so terrified by the glowing, eyeless face that he drew a pistol and chased her, only for her to disappear completely. The sightings became famous. Captain Frederick Marriott, a friend of Charles Dickens, insisted on sleeping in the haunted room in 1836. He too saw her, describing her as the Brown Lady, and even fired a pistol at the apparition, the bullet passing harmlessly through her and lodging in a door. For another 100 years, the Brown Lady was a local legend, a terrifying secret kept by the Townshend family and their guests. Then came September 19, 1936. Two photographers, Captain Hubert Prevant and his assistant Indra Shira, arrived at Raynham Hall. They were on assignment for Country Life magazine, tasked with photographing the home's impressive architecture. They had been working all day. Around 4 p.m., they began setting up to photograph the grand oak staircase. The process was slow. Shira set up the camera on its tripod, while Prevant prepared the lighting flash. As Shira stood by the camera readying the shot, he suddenly saw it. "Prevant, quick! There's something on the staircase. It's a vaporous, veiled form. It's coming down." Prevant, busy with his equipment, saw nothing. "What are you talking about?" he snapped, thinking his assistant was joking. "It's here," Shira yelled, his voice shaking. "I can see it. 1, 2, 3. At Shira's count, Prevant triggered the blinding flash. As the light faded, Shira's hand was still on the camera's lens cap, which he had removed. "What was all that about?" Prevant asked, annoyed. Shira, pale and trembling, could barely speak. "I saw her," he whispered. "A transparent, spectral woman gliding down the stairs, right where you were standing." Prevant dismissed it. Nerves. Tricks of the light. They packed up and returned to London. When the negative was developed, their blood ran cold. There, just as Shira had described, was a faint, transparent figure descending the staircase. You could see the steps through her body. It was an ethereal, veiled shape, perfectly matching the century of sightings of the Brown Lady. The photograph was published in Country Life magazine on December 16, 1936. It caused a global sensation. Skeptics, of course, immediately tried to debunk it. They claimed it was a smudge on the lens, a light leak, or a deliberate double exposure. But photographic experts who analyzed the negative found no evidence of tampering. A light leak wouldn't create such a specific humanoid form. A double exposure would likely show a seam or a mismatch in the lighting, which wasn't present. Indra Shira, until the day he died, swore to what he saw. He saw the figure before the flash ever went off. The camera, it seems, just confirmed what his eyes already knew. The Brown Lady of Raynham Hall remains the most compelling and terrifying photographic evidence of a ghost ever captured. Our next story takes us from the haunted holes of England to the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Pacific Ocean. It's a story of brotherhood, tragedy, and a loyalty so strong it refused to be broken, even with death. In December 1924, the oil tanker SS Watertown was steaming its way from California to New York City via the Panama Canal. On board were two crewmen, James Courtney and Michael Meehan. They were sailors, tough men, but also close friends, well-liked by the entire crew. Their job was routine, but dangerous. On this particular day, they were assigned to clean a cargo tank. It was a grim, suffocating job. As they worked in the dark, cramped space, something went horribly wrong. A gas leak. The two men were overcome by the toxic fumes. Before anyone realized they were in distress, it was too late. Their shipmates pulled their lifeless bodies from the tank. The entire ship was plunged into mourning. As maritime tradition dictated, there was only one thing to do:
The next day, December 4th, the captain, Keith Tracy, conducted a full burial service at sea. The bodies of James Courtney and Michael Meehan, wrapped in canvas, were committed to the deep, slipping beneath the waves of the Pacific. The crew was somber. The incident was a tragic loss, but they were sailors. They had to move on. The ocean, however, had other plans. The very next day, a crewman was swabbing the deck when he looked over the port side. He stopped, staring into the ship's wake. He called for another sailor. He too saw it. There, in the churning white foam behind the ship, were two faces. He described them as giant spectral heads bobbing in the waves. They were unmistakably the faces of James Courtney and Michael Meehan. Soon, the entire crew was at the rail, watching in stunned silence. The faces were clear as day. They weren't just random shapes in the foam. This was no pareidolia. They were them. The faces would stare at the ship, at their friends, before fading, only to reappear moments later. This continued for days. Every day, as the Watertown steamed south, the phantom faces of Courtney and Meehan followed them. The crew was not terrified. They were comforted. They felt their friends were still with them, accompanying them on their final voyage. Captain Tracy, however, was a practical man. He documented the sightings in the ship's log, but he knew no one would believe it. He needed proof. When the ship docked in Panama, Captain Tracy went ashore and purchased a camera, a simple Kodak. As they resumed their journey into the Atlantic, the faces returned. Captain Tracy grabbed the camera, ran to the rail, and began snapping pictures of the wake. He took an entire roll of film. When the ship finally arrived in New Orleans, Tracy rushed the film to a commercial developer. The developer, processing the negatives, found nothing on the first 5 shots, just waves. But on the 6th negative, he stopped. His heart pounded. There, clearly visible in the water, were 2 massive human faces. The negative was sent to the city's service company, the owners of the Watertown. They were baffled. They hired the famous Burns Detective Agency to investigate. The agency analyzed the negative. They interviewed Captain Tracy. They interviewed every single man on the crew. Their findings: no evidence of fraud, no tampering. The crew was unanimous, sober, and sane. They all saw the same thing. The photograph, it seemed, was genuine. Skeptics have argued that it was simply a unique wave formation or a trick of light on the water. But how does that explain an entire crew, independent of each other, identifying the specific faces of their 2 dead friends before any picture was ever taken? The camera, once again, merely captured what human eyes were already witnessing: a goodbye from the sea.
From the ocean, we travel to the dry, ancient heart of Australia. This story doesn't involve a tragic death or a haunted house. It involves something stranger, something perhaps not from our world at all. The year is 1959. The location is Alice Springs, a remote town in Australia's Northern Territory. Reverend R.S. Blantz, a clergyman, was visiting the area. He was drawn to a striking local landmark known as Corroboree Rock. This pillar of dolomite is not just a geological wonder. It is a sacred site for the local Arrente Aboriginal people, a place steeped in spiritual history and Dreamtime legends. Reverend Blantz was alone. It was a clear, quiet day. He was an amateur photographer and wanted to capture the stark beauty of the ancient rock formation. He raised his camera, framed this shot, and took a simple landscape photograph. He saw no one. He heard nothing. The only sound was the click of the shutter. Satisfied, he continued his day. It wasn't until weeks later, back home, that he had the film developed. As he looked at the print, he was confused. The picture of the rock was fine, but there was something in the foreground.
something that should not have been there. He looked closer. There, standing in the low scrub brush to the right of the rock, was a figure. It was tall and seemed to be wearing a long, light-colored coat or gown. It was semi-transparent. You could see the landscape through its body. It seemed to be holding something to its face, perhaps binoculars or a camera of its own, as if it too were a tourist. But the most unsettling part, it was looking directly at the Reverend. Reverend Blance was adamant. He was alone. The camera was empty. He took one picture. And in that picture, something impossible stared back. To this day, the identity of the Corroboree Rock spaceman, as it's sometimes called, remains a complete mystery. Some places are just wrong. They are magnets for tragedy, for dark energy. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, a small, abandoned graveyard near Chicago, Illinois, is one of those places. Its reputation is legendary. Established in the 1840s, it fell into disuse and became a dumping ground, not just for trash, but for bodies. In the 1960s and 70s, it was a known dumping spot for Chicago mob victims. It was also a popular site for occult rituals, with reports of animal sacrifices and dark ceremonies. It is, by any measure, one of the most haunted places in America. Reports from the site are constant. Phantom vehicles vanishing on the nearby road. Glowing orbs of light, dubbed the Flitter. A phantom house farm that appears and disappears. And a two-headed monster set to emerge from the nearby lagoon. And of course, the ghosts. The most famous is the White Lady, or the Madonna of Bachelor's Grove. She is said to be the spirit of a woman buried next to her infant child, wandering the cemetery in eternal grief. On August 10, 1991, the Ghost Research Society, GRS, a respected paranormal investigation group, decided to visit the cemetery. It was not a dark and stormy night. It was a clear, bright, sunny afternoon. The GRS members, including photographer Mary Huff, were conducting a baseline investigation. The cemetery was empty. They were the only living souls there. Mary Huff was using high-speed black and white film sensitive to anomalies. She walked the grounds, taking pictures of the tombstones, the landscape, the empty air. She took one particular shot of a large, prominent tombstone near a small lagoon. The area was empty. The team finished their investigation and left. Later, when Mary developed her film, she examined the contact sheets. One photo made her stop cold. The photograph of the tombstone. It wasn't empty. Sitting on the tombstone was a woman. She was young, dressed in old-fashioned, almost pioneer-style clothing. Her hands were clasped in her lap. Her expression was one of profound, haunting sadness. She seemed to be looking down, perhaps at a child's grave that was no longer there. And she was translucent. The GRS team was stunned. They confirmed Mary's report. No one was in the cemetery. No one was dressed in period costume. It was not a hoax by the team. The photograph was analyzed by photographic experts. It was not a double exposure. The lighting is consistent, and the figure is interacting with the tombstone, not just superimposed on it. It was not a processing error. The photo became world famous. It was named the Madonna of Bachelor's Grove. Who was she? Was she the White Lady seen for decades? Was she the grieving mother forever searching for her child? Unlike the Brown Lady, she wasn't spotted by the photographer. She was invisible to the naked eye. She was only seen by the camera. A silent,
sorrowful resident of a cemetery that refuses to let its dead rest in peace. Our final story is one of total destruction, a story of fire, history, and a photograph that captured an innocent face in the middle of an inferno. November 19th, 1995, the historic Wem Town Hall in Shropshire, England, was engulfed in flames. The building, built in 1905, was a beloved local landmark. The fire was massive, a raging inferno. The roof collapsed, the floors pancaked. Firefighters battled the blaze for hours, but it was a lost cause. The building was being utterly destroyed. A crowd of locals gathered across the street, watching in horror as their history turned to ash. Among them was a local man named Tony O'Reilly. He was an amateur photographer. He grabbed his camera, equipped with the long telephoto lens, and began snapping pictures of the disaster from the safety of the street. He wasn't trying to capture anything supernatural. He was just documenting a tragic local event. The building was a gut-wrenching skeletal wreck. The negatives were sent to be developed. When O'Reilly got the pictures back, he looked through them one by one. Fire, smoke, collapsing beams, and then one photo. In the center of the frame, standing in a burning doorway, was a young girl. She was small, wearing what looked like an old-fashioned dress or apron. She was standing calmly, her head slightly turned, looking out towards the photographer. She was seemingly untouched by the inferno that was raging around her. Her outline was clear. She was not on fire, she was just there. O'Reilly was shocked. He submitted the photo to a local newspaper. It was quickly picked up by national and international press. It became known as the Wem Town Hall ghost. Who was she? Locals and historians immediately found a candidate. In 1677, a massive fire had destroyed much of the town of Wem. That fire, legend said, was started accidentally by a 14-year-old girl named Jane Churm. Had Tony O'Reilly captured the ghost of Jane Churm, forever bound to the fires of Wem, calmly observing the destruction? The photograph was sent to experts. The Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena analyzed the original negative. Their conclusion? It appeared to be genuine. There was no sign of a double exposure. The negative was clean. The girl was in the fire. For 15 years, the photograph of the Wem Town Hall girl was considered one of the most compelling pieces of paranormal evidence ever recorded. And then came the twist. In 2010, a local man named Brian Lear, a retired engineer, was looking at a local history book. He saw a postcard printed in 1922 showing the streets of Wem. And he noticed something. In the postcard, standing in a doorway on the street, was a young girl. He looked closer. He compared the girl in the postcard to the girl in the Tony O'Reilly fire photograph. They were identical. The same dress, the same hat, the same posture. The mystery, it seemed, was solved. Tony O'Reilly, who had died in 2005, must have faked the photograph. He must have somehow superimposed the image of the girl from the postcard onto his picture of the fire. But that solution presents its own set of mysteries. O'Reilly was an amateur. The technology to do this flawlessly in 1995 was highly advanced and expensive. Why would he do it? He never asked for money for the photo, and he defended its authenticity until his death. And the biggest question of all, how did he just happen to pick an image of a girl from 1922 who just happened to fit the 300-year-old local legend of Jane Churm and the Great Fire? Was it deliberate, incredibly well-researched hoax, or was it, in some ways, the debunking made the story even stranger? From a vengeful lady on a staircase, to phantom sailors on the high seas, from an unknown being in the Australian desert to a grieving mother in a haunted cemetery, and an innocent girl in a tower of fire. These images are more than just curiosities. They are profound challenges to our understanding of reality. They force us to ask the questions we are often too afraid to answer. What happens when we die? Are we alone? Can a moment of intense tragedy echo through time, imprinting itself on a place forever? Are these all just elaborate hoaxes, tricks of light, the desperate need of a grieving mind to see patterns in the static? Or are they fleeting, terrifying glimpses into a world that exists just beyond our own? A world that is watching us. A world that, every now and then, steps out of the shadows and into the frame.